Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to install and set up a Neo4j graph database in Windows. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about what graph databases are, but this isn't by any means a front-to-back course on graph databases. I do have a full Neo4j course available at eduonix.com that goes into graph database structure in detail, so I'll put that link in the description. Now before we go ahead and install it, I just want to take a look at a simple graphic that I created that kind of shows you how a graph database works. Now graph databases are much different than your traditional relational database like MySQL or Postgres. Instead of using tables with rows and columns, we use a graph with nodes and relationships. Alright, now both of these types of databases have their place. A relational database is great for tabular data that's not really closely related. All right, if you have any experience with relational databases, then you know if you have a lot of nested relationships, it can get really complicated with join tables and join queries, and you need all kinds of primary and foreign keys, and it just can be a real mess. And even worse than that, it can be really taxing on the system. So graph databases were built to kind of fix that problem and work with data that's much more closely related and more dynamic. All right, so if we take a look at this image here, and you see these three orange dots, these represent what's called a node, and a node represents some kind of data entity. All right, now nodes can have labels. In this case, we have a user label for these nodes, and each one represents a single user. Alright, now nodes can also have what's called properties, which are basically just attributes. In this case, each one has a name and an age. Now, if we look in between the nodes, we have these lines which represent the relationship between each node. Alright, so for instance, John and Alice have a friends relationship. Now, what's nice about this, with relationships, they can also have properties just like nodes, which is something that's much different than what you would see in MySQL. Alright, so this friends relationship has a property of since, which is the year that these two became friends. Alright, and you can see that John and Steve also have a friends relationship, and then Steve and Alice have a married relationship, which also has a since property. Alright, so this is essentially how graph databases work. Obviously, the more nodes and the more data relationships you have, the more complicated it gets. All right, but when you have thousands of nodes and you look at a graph database, it's a lot more telling than looking at thousands of users in a column and a table of columns. You can actually start to see patterns, and it's really helpful because it's a little closer to what we actually think when we think of data. We don't think in columns and rows unless you're a robot. Alright, so just wanted to kind of get that out of the way just in case you have no clue what a graph database is. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and go to neo4j.com and just click on the download button up here in the right. Alright, now there's a couple different versions. There is the enterprise version, which has better scaling and has additional features. We're not going to get into that. That's more for a company and that plans on having a lot of data. We're going to go ahead and just get the community edition. Okay, so we're going to click that button, and that should start to download. Let's see. Okay, so that file is 96.1 megabytes, which isn't that bad. Alright, so once that's done, we can go ahead and open it. Alright, so you should get a box like this. It's going to ask you where you want to install it. I'm just going to keep it in program files. That's fine. Click next. Accept the agreement. Next. Alright, so that's it. Now we can choose to run it. We'll click finish. Alright, so when you first try and run Neo4j, you're going to get this. It says choose a graph database directory and then start the server. So the default is going to be in your documents folder. Alright, you can choose a different location if you want, but I'm just going to keep that and just click Start. Alright, so now when it turns green, it's telling us to browse to localhost port 7474. So I'm going to click that, and you should see a screen like this. It's going to ask you for a login, and by default, the username and password are both going to be Neo4j. Okay, we'll click Connect, and then it'll ask you to set your password or change your password, and now we're connected. Alright, so you should see an interface like this. Now each of these boxes, this one here and this one, these are called frames, and this is basically like a welcome frame. Okay, so it gives you a couple different options to kind of go through little tutorials. For instance, this Learn About Neo4j, if I click Start Learning, it's going to tell us about nodes and relationships and properties, things that we actually just went over. Alright, if I click the arrow, you can see it shows us a node with some fields or some properties, and kind of just goes through what we've already talked about. Alright, now you'll notice up in the corner here we have this :play concepts. This one has play start. These are commands that we can actually run up here in the editor. Alright, so if we were to get rid of this, close these out, and say :play start, you'll see that it'll open that up. So you can actually run different commands in here. Alright, now if you want help with the commands, you can actually type in :help commands, and it'll tell you all the different help commands here. So for instance, the server connection, we could say help server, and that would open that up. We could look at the status by saying server status. Alright, so it'll show us what we're connected as and so on. Alright, so you can look at a list of the commands in the documentation, so you can do different things, but we're not going to really do any more with that. Alright, so let's take a look over here on the side, and if I click this icon, you see that it opens this sidebar with some database information. So here's where you can see all the labels in your database, all of the relationships, and all of the property keys, which obviously we don't have any yet. And then you have some database information down here, like the version, the name, the size. Alright, and then this next icon is favorites. You can actually save certain queries in your favorites. You see we have basic queries here. If I was just to click on one of these, it'll just pop up here. Now I'm going to get rid of that because I want to type our own query, but just so you can know, you can save favorites and store them over here. This tab here is just documentation, so if you want to learn a bit more after this video, you can check that out. Down here we have an option for Neo4j browser sync. This is a service that allows you to basically push your local database to a cloud version of it. You have to sign up and sign in to be able to do that. Alright, then we have some browser settings. User interface, we can change the theme, the color of it. The initial command, which by default is just play start, but you can set it up to, for instance, grab all of your nodes and display them, whatever you'd like it to be when you first enter the interface. And then down here we just have some connection information, things like that. And then this last tab is just about the system, the version, license, things like that. Alright, so what I want to do now is just start to create a couple nodes. Alright, so let's say create, and remember a node is represented with parentheses, and we can give it a identifier, so we can use n. That's what I usually use. If we're working with relationships, I'll use A, B, C. But if we're working with a single node, I tend to just use n, but you could use whatever you'd like. Alright, so that's our identifier. Now we also want to give this node a label. I'm going to give it a label of person. Alright, now if we want to add properties, we want to just open up some curly braces, and this syntax is pretty much identical to JSON syntax. We want, let's say, name, and we're going to set that to, we'll set it to Brad. Okay, so that's how we can add properties. If we want, we could just put a comma and add more, but I'm just going to do a name for now. Alright, so that'll create a node, a person node with the name of Brad. Now you don't have to return anything on a create, but you can. So let's just say return n. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and execute that with this play button up here. And there we go, we have our first node. Okay, if I hover over it and you look down in this area, you'll see that it has an ID of 0. Okay, the ID is auto-generated, and it also has a name of Brad, which is a property that we gave to it. Alright, now every time you run a query, it's going to show your result in a new frame. Alright, which you can pin to the top if you want. You can also just get rid of them with the X. Alright, let's create a couple more person nodes. So if we click the up arrow, you can see that it gives us the last query. I'm just going to go ahead and just change some of these. We'll say Melanie. And you can see every return it's going to open up a new frame. Now you don't see Brad in here because it's only returning what we set up here, which is just this one node. I'll show you how to look at all of our nodes in a second. Alright, so say Mike, Jill, and say Jack. Okay, so if we want to look at all of our nodes, we can say match n, and then we'll just return n. Alright, so essentially these statements are made up of a match and then a return. Alright, so there we go, there's all of the nodes in our database. Now we can also create nodes with other labels, and before I do that, let's click here and you can see that we have a list of our labels and we have a person label. So let's create a different kind of node. So we'll create, say n, and let's give this one a label of movie. Okay, and then we'll have a property called title, and let's say Caddyshack. I don't know why that just popped in my head, but it did. Alright, and then we'll just return n. Now notice that this node is a different color. Neo4j browser will automatically set different colors to different labels. Alright, so let's add another movie. Let's say Scarface. Okay, let's do Gremlins. Alright, I don't know why I'm thinking of all 80s movies, but hey. Alright, so now what I want to do is look at the whole thing together. So we're going to say match n, return n, and that gives us all of the nodes. If we wanted to get, let's say, just the movie nodes, we could say match n movie, and that gives us just the movies. Alright, so that's pretty much all there is to creating nodes. Now let's say we want to add a property to a node. Alright, so we'll say Jack, let's say we want to add an age. Alright, so what we can do is first match. We want to match, let's say n, and this is a person node that we want to match, and then we'll say we want the one with name that equals Jack. And then we can simply go to the end here and say set n.age, and we'll set that to 34. Okay, so that just says set one property. Now if we go, and a shortcut if we want to see the whole graph is to click this asterisk over here. Alright, and then if I hover over Jack and you look down in this area, you'll see that he now has an age of 34. Alright, so that's how we can add properties. And that's also how we can update properties. Let's say we want to set it to 35. We can go ahead and run that same query, and now if we look, now he's 35. Alright, same thing if we want to remove. Okay, so let's say so match n person with the name of Jack, and then we'll say remove n.age. Okay, so now if we go ahead and look, now his age is gone. Alright, so it's that simple to add and remove properties. Alright, so now I want to get into relationships. Alright, so let's say we want to add a relationship with Jack and Jill. So what we're going to do is we're going to say match, and we're going to use A as an identifier, but this could just as well be anything. And we want to say it's person, and the name Jack. Okay, so now we're going to go here and put a comma, open up another set of parentheses, and this is going to be the one that we want to add as a relationship. So we'll use B as an identifier, still a person, and we want the person with the name of Jill. And then what we're going to do is say merge, and we're going to take the A node and we want to set a relationship. Now we could go like this, that represents a relationship, A to B, but we want to name this relationship, so we're going to go right in the middle here and open up some brackets, and we're going to say R as an identifier, which again this could be anything, and let's add married as a relationship. Alright, so let's go ahead and run that, and then we'll go ahead and look at the graph, and now you can see that Jack and Jill have a married relationship. Alright, and you can also see that you can move these around any way you'd like. So let's go ahead and add another relationship. I'm just going to click up twice, and let's change the name here. Actually, we'll leave Jack, and let's give him a friends relationship with Brad. So over here we're going to change married to friends. Now you can also add properties into a relationship just like you can with nodes. Let's put a space right here, open up some curly braces, and we'll say since 1998. Okay, we'll take a look at the graph, and now you can see that Jack is friends with Brad, and if I hover over friends, you'll see we have that since property of 1998. Alright, now we can also add relationships between nodes that don't have the same label. So for instance, maybe Jill, maybe her favorite movie is Caddyshack. So what we can do is let's change the person to Jill, and then the relationship is going to be to a movie, and the name, or not the name, the title is Caddyshack, and then we'll change the relationship to favorite, and we don't need let's not do a property here, so we'll just get rid of that. Alright, so we're matching the person Jill with the movie Caddyshack, and the relationship is going to be favorite. So let's go ahead and run that. Okay, take a look at the graph, and now you can see that Jill has a favorite movie of Caddyshack. Alright, so you can see how easy this is. It's really not difficult at all. Once you learn the patterns with Cypher and how to add relationships, it's really pretty easy, and it's pretty cool. I think this is a lot more interesting than looking at a bunch of rows of data. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video, and I'm just going to add a bunch of more relationships here, and then we can start to look at some other queries fetching certain data. Alright, so I will be right back. Alright, so I just went ahead and added a couple more relationships. Now I want to get into searching or querying for data, or fetching data. Now let's say we want to get the person Jill. Okay, we want the person node of Jill. So all we have to do is say match n, and we can specify person, but we don't have to. And then we'll say where. Okay, just like SQL, we have where clauses, where n.name is equal to Jill. Alright, and then we just want to return n. And there we go, gives us Jill. Now if we want to just return a property, we could do that as well by just tacking onto the end dot name. All right, and now you can see that when we ask for fields, it gives us this row layout. All right, now we can also use operators like and or. So let's say that we want to search nodes where n.name equals Jill or n.name equals Mike. Okay, so now you can see that it returns us a row with the name Mike and Jill. All right, and of course, if I get rid of the dot name, it'll give us the whole node in graph format. Now we can also get specific nodes without using where. All right, so if we were to say match n person, and then we can just put the property in here like name Brad, and then just return n. Okay, so you can see that that gives us a single node as well without having to use where. We just plug the properties in. All right, so what if we want to search data based on a relationship? Let's get all the friends of Jack. So we'll say match, and we'll say A. This is going to be a person with the name of Jack. Sorry about that. And then we want the relationship, so we're going to put brackets here and then colon friends, another dash, and then we'll use a greater than, and then we need the node that we want it to relate to as friends, which will just be B person. All right, and then we'll say return A B. Okay, so what this gives us is it gives us Jack and anybody that he's friends with. Okay, so he's friends with Mike, Brad, and Melanie. And it also shows if any of his results have a relationship with each other, it'll show that as well. All right, now if we don't want to return Jack, we can just get rid of the A and just return B. Okay, and that gives us his friends. Okay, at the same time, we can also just return A, which would be just Jack. All right, now I want to try this the other way around, and let's take the name property out of A and put it into B. Okay, and then we'll just return AB. Alright, now when I do that, it gives us no rows. The reason for that is because we have this greater than here, which is basically pointing in a certain direction. So people that are friends with Jack, not that Jack is friends with. Because if we look down here, you'll see that the relationships, they do have a direction. Okay, we have the arrow pointing down here. All right, and if we look at this, Jack is friends with other people, but people are not friends with Jack. Now, when we write our queries, it has to be in this direction, but we don't have to stick with that direction when we actually do a search or a query. So what we can do up here is we can get rid of this as greater than. Okay, so just leave it like that. So if we go ahead and run that, that's going to give us everything in every direction. All right, and at the same time, we could put a less than right here to go that way. Okay, and that gives us, obviously that gives us anybody that Jack is friends with. All right, so just to let you know that you can do different directions when you're querying the data or the relationship. All right, so we're kind of running out of time here. The last thing I want to look at is deleting nodes. Now, it's important to know that, let me just take a look at the whole graph. When you delete a node, you can't delete a node unless you delete all its relationships. If it has relationships, you can't delete it. All right, so let's give it a shot and just see what happens. So let's say match a person, and then we're going to, let's see, put our property in here. So person, whoops, person name, and let's do Jill. And then over here on this side, we're going to say delete A. Alright, so we get this error and it says cannot delete node because it still has relationships. Alright, so we have to delete the relationship. So if we look at Jill, she has a favorite movie, and she also has she's married to Jack. So we have to delete those relationships. So let's do match. By the way, these commands don't have to be case sensitive. I just like to use uppercase. Alright, so let's see. A person name Jill. Alright, now we have to delete the relationships, so let's go like that. And I'm just going to use an identifier in here because I want to delete all relationships. And let's point to B, which can be, I'm not going to give it a label because I want to delete any relationships between movies or other people. Alright, and then we simply can say delete A, B, and R. Okay, so that didn't work. Let's see, what am I missing here? Maybe we have to just delete R first, just the relationships. Okay, there we go. Deleted relationships. Now, if we look at the graph, okay, now Jill is by herself. She has no relationships. So now we should be able to delete the node. There we go. Alright, so now if we look, now there's no Jill. Now, if we want to delete everything, there's a command we can do for that. So let's say match N, and then we need to say optional match N, and we want any relationship it has. So we'll put R to any node, and then delete N and R. Oops. Okay, if we look at our graph now, we have no rows. Alright, if I reload and look over here, the labels are gone, the relationships are gone, but it holds the keys for some reason. Those don't get deleted. Now, let's say you want a brand new database. What you could do is you want to go to your database file, which is in, by default, Documents, Neo4j, and then default GraphDB. Alright, now what we can do is just delete. Actually, we have to stop the server first. Okay, and then we can just delete everything in here. Okay, and then we can go back in, start it, go back to the browser, and it's going to be just like it was the first time you came. You have to log in with Neo4j, and then it'll ask you for a password to change it to. Alright, and now if we look over here, even the keys are gone, and we're good as new. Now, there are ways you can have multiple instances of Neo4j running on the same system, so you can have multiple databases, but I'm not going to get into that. I just kind of wanted to scratch the surface and introduce you to graph databases if you didn't know what they were, or if you just heard about them and you wanted to get into it a little more. Alright, now if you're interested and you do like this stuff, I would suggest going to eduonix.com and getting the Neo4j course that I did. I believe it's 6 chapters. It has a project where we'll actually work with Node.js and create a Node application that uses Neo4j, and it's pretty neat. So hopefully you guys liked this video. If you did, please give it a like, leave a comment, whatever you can do is great, and thanks for watching.